Good morning, everybody. I'm here to provide an update on the ongoing situation in North and Far North Queensland, and this message is particularly important for all communities between Mackay and Cairns. I want to provide some information because we remain prepared for the ongoing prospect of more rain and the likelihood of more flooding, both flash flooding and riverine flooding. Some key messages that we need to provide, and I want to start with those residents in what's been described as Townsville's black zone, and we've articulated those 6 suburbs, and over the last couple of days residents have been door-knocked and given the advice to prepare, and then again door-knocked yesterday and they left, and we thank them very much for heeding that advice. Residents in that area need to be prepared to stay away until the all-clear can be given, and at this stage it can't be. And we will continue to provide that information as it comes to hand, but ultimately that flooding situation will be impacted by the amount of rainfall, the tides and dam releases. So all of those information will be provided as they can, but our advice to residents in the black zone at the moment is to stay out of that zone and stay safe. To residents in the pink zone outside of that, please maintain your vigilance and keep connected with information as it comes to hand. If you get into a situation, of course, if it's a dangerous situation, phone 000, but we're asking residents in those pink zones to remain connected with the advice as it comes to hand. To the other impacted communities north and south of Townsville, I want to start with Ingham. And to that community, we are deeply sorry for their loss. And it is no doubt a very sad time, and it's a small community. It's a tight-knit community, and we wish them well. Likewise, to see the level of devastation in that community is very difficult. We're talking about people's homes, their businesses. There will be immense damage to the agricultural sector there, and that is a very strong and a resilient community, but this is a flood the likes of which is only seen a handful of times, and that community is certainly in our thoughts today. Likewise in Cardwell, where there have been reports of a number of dwellings that have been inundated, and I'll discuss some of the rescues in a moment, but to the people of Cardwell and indeed further north in places like Innisfail and Tully, we're asking them to remain vigilant today. To the south of Townsville, Garoo, dealing with major levels there, and that is a community that is very resilient. People in Garoo know how to handle flooding, I can assure you, but it's a big flood. And they are certainly in our thoughts, and we ask those residents to also maintain their vigilance. I want to thank very much the emergency services who have responded. We had 11 swiftwater rescues overnight, and we did pre-position people like the Water Police and those swiftwater rescue teams and the SES. We put them in ahead of this incident several days ago, and they've been put to great work, and we want to thank them for the way they have conducted their work overnight again, and mindful of the demands on their systems, and we thank them very much for what they have done across the board. There remains many flood warnings, and Matt is joining us from the Bureau. I might leave him to do that. Our response at the moment has many elements. Obviously there's people's homes, there's also electricity, water, roads, and obviously the rescue response. And we will continue to make sure we provide information as it comes to hand so that residents know that they are in our thoughts and that we will continue to respond to what the challenges that lie ahead. I outlined about the personal hardship payments that have been declared in conjunction with the federal government, and I spoke about them yesterday. Townsville, Palm, Hinchinbrook, and obviously Gordonvale from earlier last week. Currently, the federal government is considering an application for Cassowary and Burdekin, and we thank them very much for the way that they've been dealing with us in that regard. So, to the residents in those impacted communities, you are able to access those hardship payments and the assistance that is needed. There are 3 ways that can be done. Firstly, they can go to the website, which is www.qld.gov.au/disaster help. Secondly, there is a community recovery hub which is open 24/7, and that is on 1800 173 349. I should read that number again for people who need assistance. 1800 173 349. And then there is face-to-face, and those opportunities will be expanded in the days ahead. From midday today, there will be 2 community recovery hubs in Townsville that are opened, but I must stress, as we work with the councils, further hubs will be rolled out, including additional hubs in Townsville, but equally to those smaller communities. The first will be at the North Townsville Community Centre, that's on Palm Drive in Dirrigan, and the Upper Ross Community Centre on Allambie Lane in Rasmussen, and there will be more to come. And we thank the councils for their assistance. I spoke yesterday about the school situation, and it is important that we continue to give clarity to parents and carers. As of today, there are 66 state schools that are closed. There are 16 independent schools, 24 Catholic schools, and over 100 early childhood centres. At 1 o'clock today, the closures for tomorrow will be on that website. That's closures.qld.edu.au, or you can Google School Closures Queensland. From 1 o'clock, that will be the list of schools for tomorrow. And we want to make sure that that advice is given early so that parents and guardians can plan. We want to make sure that they're able to make accommodation for their children. So that will happen from 1 p.m. Roads. There are multiple situations of roads of all varieties that are out of action. That information's on disaster.qld.gov.au. Our advice is if you don't have to be driving, please don't drive. There's been some images that we've seen overnight that has proven that the north, and indeed all of regional Queensland, is at the mercy of one road. The images from Olera Creek show the vulnerability of regional Queenslanders. That road must be repaired and repaired swiftly, but there's also an opportunity for betterment in that regard. Queenslanders get frustrated when they see the same bit of infrastructure replaced to the same location and the same standard, and somehow we expect a different result. That doesn't make sense, and there is an opportunity through disaster to build back better, and I point to Olera Creek as an example of that. It's one of my great passions. During a disaster, people are resilient and they respond. It's also an opportunity to give them a bit more resilience baked into the system. And I see that as an opportunity, firstly to reconnect the community and then to make sure that we build back better. We are prepared for a scenario where rivers may continue to rise. We are prepared for a situation where high tides may impact different communities. And we will continue to make sure that that information comes to Queenslanders. Today I'm letting communities know that we are confident about the preparation for this stage of the disaster event and indeed the future. We're just asking Queenslanders to do the same, and your preparation involves continuing to stay safe and putting your safety ahead of any form of property safety. And if Queenslanders do that, we are confident that that situation can maintain and we can get through the worst of this. The Townsville Airport has reopened this morning, and I plan to head to North Queensland this afternoon to go and speak to those communities. It's important that I make sure that things that need to be delivered are delivered, and by being on the ground that can occur. And I want those communities to know that they matter to us. We are a really proud state, and part of that is how decentralised we are. And these communities form a really important part of the fabric of who we are. Can I acknowledge the incredible efforts of everyone involved? All of the state agencies, all of them. Police and fireys and AMBOs are at the front and centre. But we flew up 300 ergon workers earlier this week. Have a look at the work that they've been doing on the ground. It's to think that we are dealing with only several thousand homes without power at this stage in the broader Townsville area. Ingham remains offline, and there's about 6,000 or 7,000 connections there. But those crews have been reconnecting those communities already, and I want to thank them for the work they do across the board. This is a state where we are a resilient state. and resilience means the communities are strong and tough. It doesn't mean that they should be left on their own though, and I want those communities to know that we're serious about the recovery, and I'll be on the ground to make sure that what needs to be delivered is delivered. Thanks very much, and I'll hand over to the Deputy Commissioner.
Thank you, Premier. Sadly, as I reported yesterday, there was one death as a result of this severe weather event, a woman in her 60s, and I really do extend my condolences to her family and the tight-knit community of Ingham. There have been no further deaths in the last 24 hours, and I can confirm that we have no further missing persons. It was a really active period overnight. We did see multiple emergency alerts going out, flash flooding in the areas of Cardwell and Blue Water yesterday afternoon and into the evening. We saw 480 requests for assistance for our SES in the past 24 hours alone, and the Chief Officer of the SES informed me it's been their busiest night so far during the response. So the response is not over yet. As the Premier indicated, and I really do want to acknowledge the work that our emergency services have been doing on the ground. We saw another 11 swiftwater rescues last night, but that's just the swiftwater rescues. We also saw an enormous amount of calls for service around our SES, our water police, our fire department last evening. I also want to acknowledge the support that we've seen the community giving each other, whether it be by boat rescuing each other, whether it's been by opening your house to those other people who are in times of need. And can I just ask today, if you haven't seen your neighbour or if you haven't heard from your neighbour for a while, or in the last 24 hours or so, can you please check on them? That's that community spirit, and that's how the community help us as emergency services to make sure everyone's safe during this event. Heavy and intense rainfall will continue around the tropical east coast today, and we're really looking at that area from emergency services perspective between Innisfail and Mackay. It is still forecast to have those local intense flooding, and that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with both the riverine flooding, but also the flash flooding that we see in areas like Cardwell and Blue Water last evening. So please, for those communities in those areas that are subject to flash flooding, can you please stay alert to our messaging, and particularly our emergency alerts that are coming out. We've started our assessments in Cardwell, our damage assessments with the Queensland Fire Department, and we know that we've got a number of properties in Cardwell inundated, and we also know that at this stage we have a handful of properties in Blue Water that have been inundated by flash flooding. We haven't started our assessments there formally yet. We also have noticed that the floodwaters are starting to impact communities a bit further west, such as Charters Towers, where we had a number of rescues last evening with motorists trapped in their vehicles. So please, if you don't need to be on the road, please don't enter the road. We still have 6 evacuation centres open, and we have nearly 400 people in our evacuation centres across Townsville, Ingham, Cardwell. So please, if you need those evacuation centres or you need to go to them, they are on our local government disaster dashboard sites, which I know you're all connected with. The ADF are ready to deploy in Townsville. The ADF have been supporting us in Townsville with the door knocks, and they've confirmed to me this morning that they have high clearance vehicles on standby ready to assist us also. The ADF have also accepted our request for assistance for aerial support right across the region to be based in Townsville. This includes 2 medium lift Chinooks that have been approved to be based there, and 2 winch capability rotary aircraft to support our other helicopters that are already on the ground. These aircraft will be available to us from late this afternoon and will be used for emergency rescue work, and we're starting to move into resupply into the communities and ensuring that we can start getting the essential services of power, communications and food resupplied into the communities. I've also progressed a further RFA to the Commonwealth for support as the waters recede to enter into our clean-up, so that we're prepared well in advance to assist the communities as the water starts to recede. And we're having a conversation with the Commonwealth ongoing about the size and what that will look like and when it'll be needed. Today there's a national coordination meeting between commissioners and chief officers where we'll be formally putting forward a request for additional SES and potentially other emergency services from interstate. Our interstate colleagues have already reached out to us and informed us that they're on the front foot ready to support Queensland, and we're going to make sure that we've got those crews on the ground this week, that the moment we see this water starting to recede, that we're in there to help the community clean up and make sure that we're there with the community. I'm going to finish off by saying, please today, stay alert to our messaging, stay alert to the warnings that are coming out. You know, the community are responding exceptionally well and are helping our emergency services workers, and I ask you to keep doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier, and thank you, Deputy Commissioner. The heavy rainfall we've seen over northern Queensland over the past week has been extreme. Widespread rainfall totals of 600 millimetres have been recorded between Innisfail and Townsville, with the highest values reaching 1,200 millimetres. Rolling Stone, just to the northwest of Townsville, has recorded 1,286 millimetres over the past week. In the past 24 hours between Cardwell and Townsville, we've seen rainfall totals of 200 to 400 millimetres, with isolated totals above 600 millimetres in 24 hours. We're continuing to see heavy to locally intense rainfall today, and that is expected to continue with falls of 150 to 300 millimetres expected, particularly between the areas of Tully and Garoo. The isolated falls are possible to reach up to 500 millimetres, so we're still seeing very significant rain. But to put these numbers in context, over the past 2 days we've been talking about higher falls reaching up to 600, so we are seeing a gradual easing in both the modelling and also what we're observing on the ground and on the radar imagery we're seeing right now. The low that is causing this weather is also starting to weaken, and that was a low that was embedded in the monsoon trough just off the coast of Ingham. So those strong winds we've observed over the past 48 hours are also expected to ease this morning. This rainfall is resulting in a continued threat of dangerous and life-threatening flash flooding, flash and riverine flooding from Cairns through to Mackay, particularly concerning around Townsville and Ingham. And I'll just run through a few of the flood warning details. We have major riverine flooding current for the Ross, the Boilie, the Horton, the Burdekin and the Upper Herbert rivers. We've also got minor to major flood warnings current for the Mulgrave and the Russell, for the Johnston River, the Tully and Murray rivers, as well as continued minor flood warnings for the Lower Burdekin, the Don River and the Pioneer. I'll just focus a little bit on the Herbert for a moment. At Ingham Pump Station, river levels are obviously well above the major flood level, and they're sitting steady at about 14.84 metres. Flood levels may still reach 15 metres today with the rainfall and the water that's already in that catchment, but this is below the 15.2 and expected to stay below that 15.2 metre level from the 1967 flood. The Ross River at Applin, Weir and Townsville is currently sitting around 1.76 metres. That's just below the major flood level at 1.8 metres, but with the current modelling, we're expecting that to reach 2 metres this afternoon. So a flood watch continues for remaining catchments from Ayr to Mackay. Now, this is a significant and protracted weather event that we're seeing, with record-breaking rainfall in many locations. That rainfall is expected to ease over the next 24 hours, and as we move into Tuesday, Wednesday, that easing trend continues. But there is a lot of water in those catchments. There's already an incredible amount of water on the ground. There is more significant rain to come, so it will take days for that water to come out of those systems. And we will continue to monitor very closely the rainfall and the responses in those rivers, so please stay up to date because it will continue to evolve. Stay up to date with emergency services and also with Bureau warnings via our website and app. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Premier. I want to, first of all, thank all first responders over the last few days. We've seen people rescued right around the flooding areas. One of the issues as Deputy Premier and Minister for State Development, that my focus is stock and essential food and services, goods and services, and to ensure that Queenslanders have access to that. And I can assure you we are up to the challenge, and we have anticipated this, as has the major supermarkets. We have been engaging, of course, with the major supermarkets, Coles and Woolies, and we have been assured that there is 6 weeks worth of food and supply available in North Queensland. The product was moved there before the floods hit, in anticipation for what was likely to unfold. We've seen situations where there has been some shops that have been closed, and I wanted to advise, as at 10 o'clock this morning, in terms of Woolworths and Coles, and we're also dealing with Metcash and other local independent providers. But with respect to supermarkets in North Queensland, I can advise that with Woolworths, they are currently closed at Ingham, Hermit Park, Fairfield and Townsville City. With respect to Coles, they've only closed Ingham. All other stores remain open. That was at 10 o'clock this morning. We are well on track to continue the discussions with the major supermarkets. Now, the biggest issue for people in flood-affected areas at the moment is accessibility to their stores. Now, I've read you the list of the stores that are currently closed, but I want to give you an example the day before yesterday of what happened in Ingham when accessibility to Coles and Woolworths was completely shut off. And the staff couldn't actually access the supermarket, but we had a call in from the mayor of that Hinchinbrook area where they needed supplies, food and drink, obviously, for the evacuation centres. We immediately contacted Coles and Woolworths. They advised us where their managers and assistant manager lived. We got the SES to go and pick up the manager and assistant manager and deliver them from their homes across the water to the supermarkets. And to see the spirit of the community at Ingham in full flight, where these managers and staff at these supermarkets, this is their local community as well. Their homes were potentially going to be flooded, their stores were going to be flooded, the streets are flooded, and yet they jumped in the dinghy, they went and they opened Coles and Woolworths, and with respect to Coles, they donated all the food that the mayor requested for the evacuation centre. And to see the images coming out of the shopping trolleys full, but half underwater, but still full, going to the evacuation centre is what the community spirit is all about. That's what will ensure happens. I think Queenslanders will see through a lot of social media at the moment, they may see many pictures of reduced stock in supermarkets. But I can assure you, as we have been assured, there is 6 weeks of food supply in North Queensland, and we'll ensure that the supermarkets get stocked up again. It may be that some people, particularly in isolated communities, are completely isolated and shut off. We will get the food to those people. We have mechanisms in place, delivery options available, and again, if people are stuck and they have no food or drink at their home, they just need to sing out, and we'll ensure they get food and water, fresh water, to their homes. We'll ensure that Coles and Woolworths keep us updated, which they have been regularly throughout the day, to ensure that the stock is put back on the shelves. And if it's not put back on the shelves, at least to the evacuation centres and to where it is needed. So I want to thank all the supermarkets in North Queensland for assisting the government in ensuring that the supply chain of essential goods and services continue to the flood-affected Queenslanders. Thank you, Premier.
Thanks, Deputy. Over to you, guys.
Premier, just on that point there where the Deputy's talking about getting food and water to people in Ingham, there's a lot of locals who are upset in Ingham at the moment about the rescue situation, saying there's only 2 boats getting people out. Is there, and there are also some calling to the Defence Force. Is there enough being done up there? What's the situation?
Well, the Defence Force is on standby, and they have agreed overnight to the use of some of their assets if required. We did pre-position swiftwater rescue crews there because they're not there in Ingham. There aren't swiftwater rescue crews normally there, so they were pre-positioned and they've done a bucket load of work. I want to assure that community that more resources will follow, and particularly with the clean-up. They're not going to be on their own, and I'll be on the ground to make sure that happens.
Can you comment on the timing of the opening of Ross River Dam, and did a delay affect downstream flooding? And if Sunwater managed the dam, would it have done anything differently to the Townsville City Council?
Well, it is a council asset, and they operate under the guidelines that's been set. And as part of any review, of course that'll be looked at, and council will have to look at that. But that's something that we'll focus on in the future. For today, we have to make sure that the communities know that there is a risk of water continuing to rise, particularly in those areas. And the dam release is part of that, as is the amount of rainfall, as are tides. All of that goes in to a mix, which is why we're saying to people in the black zone to stay out for now. We can't give you that clarity, but we will give the information in real time so they can make an informed assessment by tonight.
What have you heard from your family up in Ingham and people who you used to live with up there?
Well, they're part of the community, so look, everyone in that community has been impacted by it. There's not a single soul that hasn't had some impact or knows someone who has been. Their homes have been flooded, their businesses have been smashed. Many of them weren't able to get insurance for their business, and whilst the damage to the crops haven't been seen yet, that will be immense as well. So, but above all, Lawrence, they've had to say goodbye to one of their own, and that's really, really difficult in a small place.
Was messaging clear, concise and updated, and did the community take this seriously from the very beginning?
People have been great, and the emergency services personnel have been absolutely brilliant. And in a disaster, you see the best of people, and you've seen that. You've seen the community spirit. Some of the images of people going door to door, helping friends and strangers, is really, really powerful. And the work that the agencies have done has been excellent. I've been around these disasters and disaster recoveries for a long time in council and in a state level. The level of pre-preparedness was as good as I've ever seen, in fact better than I've ever seen. The rate of response has been a thing of credit to everyone involved in that, and I'm talking about all of those agencies. And the way that the different levels of government have worked together has also been, quite frankly, refreshing. You saw the federal minister here yesterday. We've had mayors on the phone, and we've been speaking to them for days. We were speaking to them well ahead of the event, and so I think the community can take confidence that they were, their concerns have been taken seriously about how big an issue this event is, and they've done a really good job. I'll go Fraser, and then I'm sorry.
Is there an estimation as to the damage built so far?
Oh, no, very, very early days, Fraser, and my focus is on people first and foremost. We've got to make sure that the community is safe, and then we rebuild. But rebuild we will, and I'm determined to make sure we rebuild to a standard that makes those communities more resilient for the next disaster. And Queenslanders are tired of seeing the same things replaced to the same standard in the same location and expect a different result. And I'm tired of it too. And I'm determined to make sure that we do it differently this time. Jack.
You said that Ingham remains offline at the moment. Do you have a time frame as to how long that's going to take to turn that around? And are there any short-term solutions you can employ at the moment, like generators in Ingham?
Yeah, we've been speaking to the Mayor, and part of that involves getting some generation capacity in there. That's really important for telecommunications, but also for their water and sewerage, and so that work's well and truly underway. In terms of the connectivity, Ingham's cut to the north and south, but the images to the south show how dire the situation is. It's not every day you see a bridge torn in two. That's what's happened at Olera Creek. And it is significant, but that can't be something that takes an extended period to repair. It's got to be done. It's got to be repaired to enable that connectivity to occur for goods and services, but also, the ability for those communities to be connected. And then long term, it needs to be replaced to a higher standard, and I've already begun those conversations, I can assure you.
In the short term, though, will you be using those army resources to try and drop stuff into that community?
Yep. Emergency workers have already been flown in by chopper today. We pre-positioned early, and we are continuing to resource those communities, and will do. But that doesn't mean that we can't get that road up and running. And the moment that water subsides, that has to be priority number one for infrastructure in terms of roads.
Has the SES had to change how it does things given the circumstances behind the Ingham woman's death and the submerged log?
Well, first and foremost, though, you had two SES personnel on board that boat, and I can only imagine how difficult the whole experience was for family of the deceased, but also the first responders, the emergency services as well. That there will be something I'm sure that'll be looked at. But in the meantime, a big thanks to our SES, and I know that the call has already gone out across the border, and there'll be assistance will be granted as well from other jurisdictions and indeed other parts of Queensland, and I think that's a tribute to them.
Are you satisfied with the way that the Ingham evacuations have taken place?
There is no doubt that what happened in Ingham has tested the community, but the fact that you had people working through the night and indeed private citizens helping other private citizens shows the resilience of it. Now, we'll continue to make sure that support is given to that community, and I'll make sure that I'm on the ground listening firsthand.
Do we have timelines yet for rebuilding and reopening the Bruce Highway?
Well, firstly, we have to make sure the water subsides, but I'll have more to say about that once I'm on the ground.
When marine flooding is yet to peak, how long is it expected to take for this water to subside?
Yeah, I think Matt articulated that well, and whilst there has been an easing, there is still a lot of water to wash through that system, and that's why it's important that people continue to heed the warnings and take the time to listen to the communications and stay up to date, because those levels may not yet have peaked in many of those systems. So it's important that they stay up to date with all of that information, and we'll be giving it to them in real time.
This might be one for the Bureau, but with the rain easing over Tuesday and Wednesday, what type of totals are we looking at? Is it still going to exceed, even 100 mils in some of these areas?
Thanks. Yeah, to put it in context, so we were talking about 150 to 300 over the next 24 hours. Yeah. As we move into Tuesday and Wednesday, we're still expecting heavy rain in the sort of 50 to 100 millimetre range in some locations, particularly again in that area between Innisfail and Townsville. But those numbers are much less than the sort of 300 and isolated values above 600 we've seen really over the past 2 to 3 days continuously. So whilst we're still seeing heavy rain over the coming days, it's substantially less than what we've seen over the past 3 days. As we get through to Thursday, Friday, those numbers continue to drop off, but we'll watch that forecast very closely. There is some drier air sort of coming up on Friday and reaching the southern, the sort of Townsville region there. So again, we'll watch that very closely.
In terms of the far north, is the worst of the rainfall for places from Cardwell up now past, or are they expecting to see more heavy rainfall over the next few days too?
Still expecting to see heavy rainfall continuing right across the tropical north coast. It's an active monsoon, right? So there's that very high moisture air feeding in across the whole region of far north Queensland. So it's not out of the ordinary or not expected. We're expecting to see falls of sort of widespread 100 to 200 millimetres across that whole area, but it is that area between about Innisfail through to Garoo where we've got warnings current. There's continuing to see very heavy showers stream in on the radar, and the modelling continues to show that really high values of, like I said, 150 to 300 millimetres through that area over the next 24 hours.
Where is that easing system tracking?
The system itself is sitting just off the coast of Ingham, and it has sat fairly stationary for about 2 days. Now, it actually tracks slightly further west and really combines with a system we're seeing out over the sort of southern part of the Gulf of Carpentaria. So as that system tracks away, the sort of convergence which really drives the rain is also easing and the sort of contracting further to the west. So that's the expectation over the coming days.
So given Mr. Chileppi said that we are seeing Charters Towers being affected now, do you think that area will see more rain in the coming days?
I expect it will see more rain over the coming days as that weather contracts and extends towards the west. The rainfall figures we're seeing through that area, as I said, widespread 100 to 200 millimetre type falls aren't out of the question, but we're not likely to see the really intense and focused rainfall we've seen over the past 3 days on the coast.
Thank you all.
Turning on other matters?
Sure.
Why did the government decide to pull out of the green hydrogen project?
I might get the deputy to address that one, and then I'll come to you.
Thank you. So just assuring that all the flood questions have been ask before we head on to other issues?
Just quickly, some locals up there have said there's been a shortage of sandbags in the Townsville area. Is that something you're aware of?
Deputy Commissioner?
Thank you. Look, we've been resupplying the sandbags right through that area. The first resupply we did was 33,000 sandbags into the Townsville and surrounds. We followed that up with a further 12,000, and as late as yesterday, we put another 10,000 into that area, and that's on top of the stock that we've already got in that area. I can assure locals we have the sandbags. All of our local council disaster dashboards have our sandbag and filling stations on there. Our local disaster management group, which have the SES sitting on those groups, are managing and making sure there's supply in those areas. So if you need sandbagging, it's still available. Go on to our local government, whether it be the Townsville, whether it be Ingham, whether it be wherever, go on to their disaster dashboards. You only got to Google Townsville disaster dashboard and you'll be able to see those sandbagging locations.
Just on the food supply issue, what does someone do if they're isolated and they can't get food? Like, how do they get it?
Thanks, Jack. So the best thing is if they contact their local disaster coordination centre through the council hotlines. If not, emergency services, and we have a range of options available to ensure that, depending on how isolated they are, where they are. So there's a first priority is to ensure that supermarkets that remain open have stock in place. So the 6 weeks of supply is the warehouses in North Queensland, right? So the warehouses are stocked, and as I said, there's many social media posts going around at the moment which show depleted stocks on the actual shelves, but that's not a true reflection of what's in the area in North Queensland. We have supply. So if people are really stuck, they need to contact their local disaster coordination through the council. Obviously, the Queensland Disaster Management Committee is meeting all over the weekend and met today, this morning. We get feedback directly from the mayors about where they, because ultimately at the end of the day we have to be guided by the mayors on the ground and the local disaster coordinators on the ground and district, and we will ensure the assets are put where they need to be. But if people do need the food, it sometimes in the isolated communities, particularly on a farm, where they just cannot get access to anywhere, the roads are all shut, they will have to be delivered food, and that could be by water, by air.
That will happen.
Absolutely, it has to happen. It has to happen, yep. And we have a methodology in place that puts all that into place, with the warehouse stock that's up there at the moment.
Just on that green hydrogen project, why has the state government pulled its funding from that program up in central Queensland?
Well, we took a policy to the election that we were going to respect Queensland taxpayers' money, and the former Labor government had asked Stanwell to invest $1 billion, not funded, not budgeted, by the way, and Stanwell have come to the government wanting more money than on top of the $1 billion that was unfunded, unbudgeted, and that project will not proceed under the new government.
What's your perspective on factional infighting from Labor at the moment?
Well, I haven't turned my attention to the infighting of the Labor Party over the last few days, because obviously the Premier and I and the ministers and government have been focusing on Queenslanders and flood victims, but you've asked the question, so I'll answer it. I think it's disgraceful that in the midst of a natural disaster in Queensland, the Queensland Labor Party would air their dirty laundry on each other, trying to hide it under the cover of a natural disaster. It's a testament to the bad leadership of Stephen Miles and Cameron Dick that the Labor Party would be infighting, and that infighting is now playing out in the public domain, as I've read this morning. I think it's a disgrace. They were fighting, the Labor Party were fighting before the election, during the election, and it looks like nothing's changed. And I think it's the backbenchers and I would say senior shadow ministers of Stephen Miles and Cameron Dick's shadow cabinet aiming to get rid of Stephen Miles and Cameron Dick as leadership team.
What happens to the other projects linked to the green hydrogen project, like solar farms?
Well, the only project that we have put on hold is that project, as I said, that required over $1 billion of investment. The Treasurer and the Energy Minister is dealing with other energy assets across Queensland to make sure we have an energy plan that's affordable and reliable, and the Energy Minister is working on those plans at the moment.
Is the saving in the budget?
Well, unfortunately, it wasn't budgeted. The former government didn't budget it, like we've seen with many things. The Pioneer Burdekin pumped hydro scheme, the former Labor government said was going to cost X billion. It turned out it was going to cost $37 billion. It was just unfortunate mismanagement of the former Labor government that we are now trying to fix, but also be transparent with Queenslanders about respecting their money. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Cheers.